My colleagues manage with this. Stop complaining when you haven't contributed a cent. That's what Bob explained as he threw $300 at me for our monthly expenses. Is he at the kind, ideal husband I thought I had was nowhere to be found, holding on to that money? I smiled brightly and replied, I contribute $2,000 to our home every month. Seeing the shocked look on Bob's face, I stood up to meet his gaze. Do you even know our monthly rent? What are you talking about? It's probably around $100, right? Even if we lived in rural Nebraska, can one really expect to rent a 3-bedroom apartment with soundproofing for just $100? Holding back my urge to yell, I quietly placed the divorce lawyer's business card on the desk. Whoa, wait, what's gotten into you? Calm down. Bob tried to soothe me, his lips quivering, but I calmly responded. It's not sudden, it's all according to plan. I stared at Bob with cold eyes, his shock rendering him speechless. My revenge has only just begun. My name is Nichelle Miller. I'm a 35-year-old housewife and work as a piano teacher. Before getting married, I worked officially at a music school. After marriage, I started offering private lessons at home. Juggling household chores, childcare, and teaching piano, my days are pretty packed. I married Bob when I was 28. We met at a charity concert organized by the piano school I worked at. Bob helped coordinate equipment and acted as a liaison between us and the venue. He wasn't exactly adept at his job, but he was quick to bond with the venue staff, ensuring smooth negotiations. Bob asked me for my contact information on our way home from the after-party of the competition. I accepted Bob's invitation for a date, and we began to go out together. Before I knew it, our relationship blossomed, and we got married on our 3rd anniversary. Bob and I have 2 children. One is a boy who looks just like Bob, and the other is a girl who looks just like me. People often say that boys resemble their mothers and girls their fathers, but in our case, it was the exact opposite. We used to joke about that. We were a very close-knit family, always going shopping together. However, once our children started elementary school, Bob began acting strange. I'll be home late. Ken, you've been busy lately, haven't you? My husband, who only occasionally worked overtime at the beginning or end of the month, suddenly had many late nights. He would always come home late, reeking of alcohol. He mentioned that since he switched to a sales job, he had a lot of client dinners, and I thought, gee, working in a company must be tough. Thankfully, since I didn't accept students in my home piano lessons in the evenings, our children were never left alone at night. Because of this, I felt a strong responsibility to support Bob to the best of my ability. However, he gradually began to show a colder attitude towards me. At first, it was small complaints about meals or housekeeping, but soon he started nitpicking about how I spent money. Ken, what's for dinner today? It's unfair that the meal for the breadwinner, which is me, is the same as for you and the kids. Mine should be more extravagant. Look, Di, I work too, you know? And the kids are growing. They eat proper meals. Stop being so selfish. Only young women can get away with that. Stop making excuses and listen to me. Forget it. I'm gonna eat out. What? Saying that, Bob left, leaving me and the kids in shock. I felt anger rising, but seeing my children frightened by Bob's outburst, I decided it was more important to comfort them. I chose not to worry about where Bob went. But from that day on, Bob's behavior changed drastically. Apart from weekday overtime, he also started working more weekends, despite complaining. I saw a delighted Bob getting ready, and I couldn't help but feel, this isn't about work. Women's intuition, as they say. Observing Bob closely, I noticed many red flags. Though he never had an interest in fashion, he started buying brands that younger people would like. He would often be on the phone on our balcony late at night. And to top it off, I saw a transaction for women's jewelry on our credit card statement. The final straw was when Bob suddenly started dictating how the household expenses should be used. All these years, you've been overspending, which limited what I could do. From now on, our monthly budget is $300. Got it, $300. That's impossible. Just the groceries for the 4 of us cost over $500. That's because you're being extravagant. From now on, I'll spend as I please. If you want to spend money, earn more yourself. He's true to his word from the next month. Bob only gave me $300. I managed with my earnings and some savings, but it was not enough to maintain the lifestyle Bob expected. I might have to consider divorce. I thought for the first time. Whether there is another woman or not, I used to think if he comes back to us before the kids are grown, it's okay. I was trying to reassure myself, but when I considered whether my children needed a father who acted irresponsibly and didn't care for his family, I felt that maybe we didn't need Bob. I was still a bit hesitant, but one day an event happened that made me decide on a divorce. Would you shut up? It was a Sunday morning, and I was making breakfast. Surprisingly, Bob, who usually leaves early, was still home. The kids went into his bedroom hoping to play with him. Then, with a loud voice that could probably be heard outside, Bob yelled at them, "Hey, why'd you yell out of nowhere like that? Isn't taking care of the kids your job? Stop slacking off. You're their father too, you know." Then, "I don't need noisy kids around. I'm trying to get some rest here. Keep them quiet. The reason you're tired is probably because you've been staying out late every night, maybe cheating on me." I bit my tongue, holding back from saying that out loud. The kids were clearly frightened, hiding behind me. Seeing them like that, the idea of divorce solidified in my mind. I need to protect my kids. As we looked at Bob, who was now snoring loudly in bed, I made up my mind. Later, I started by checking my own finances. Could I maintain our lifestyle while continuing my classes from home? And what about the future of the kids? But to my surprise, I realized that I could sustain our lifestyle just on my own income. The reason our expenses had shot up was because of the family credit card, which we had gotten for both of us, seemingly forgetting it was a family card. Bob had been using it here and there. Sometimes the bills even exceeded $1,000 a month. For shame, I had only been checking the total amounts, but Bob's charges started increasing right around when he began working late. And they were all at fancy restaurants and hotels, the kind you'd go to for a romantic getaway. My love for Bob cooled to absolute zero as I realized he might be using our family card for trysts with his affair. But confronting him now might just make him hide the affair. So, I decided to first make sure our finances were rock solid, and then corner him once everything was set. That 3 months after learning about Bob's affair, I managed to gather all the evidence. Bob had no idea that I was onto him, so gathering evidence was a breeze. No need for a private investigator. Then, on Bob's payday, I decided to make my move, getting ready for a date with his mistress, perhaps. Bob was in high spirits that morning, humming while picking out his clothes. I approached him cautiously. "Hey, isn't it payday today? The $300 you've been giving for household expenses isn't cutting it. I think you'd understand if you checked our finances. Will you stop with the excuses? It's all your incompetence. You've ruined my mood." He interrupted me angrily. But I persisted. But, it's not enough. At this rate, we might have to sell the house." Bob sighed dramatically and ran his fingers through his hair. He took out his wallet, pulled out 3 bills, and waving them at me, said, "My colleagues get by with this. You haven't chipped in a cent, so stop complaining." Saying that, he threw the $300 meant for expenses at me. The kind and loving husband I had married was nowhere to be found. I clenched the money and smiled back at him. "I put $2,000 into our home every month," I said. Bob looked at me with a blank expression. Standing up, I met his gaze. "Do you know how much the rent for this house is?" "What are you talking about? It's probably around $100, right? Regardless of living in the countryside of Nebraska, can you really believe you can live in a 3-bedroom house with a mortgage for just $100? Holding back my urge to yell, I quietly placed the divorce lawyer's business card on the desk. "Michelle, what's going on?" "Calm down," Bob said, trying to soothe me with a twisted smile. "It's not sudden. It's all according to plan," I replied coldly. Bob looked shocked, at a loss for words. I stared back with indifferent eyes. The revenge has only just begun. To make things clearer, I placed another set of documents on the table. Seeing them, Bob's face turned pale. What does this mean?" "These are my income statement and our household expenses." What I showed him was our household ledger, the house contract, and the copy of the account book we report to the ERS. The ledger detailed our monthly expenses, and the house contract showed the monthly mortgage repayment. "Bert sees you're lying about the $1,000 rent," he accused. "No matter how rural Nebraska is, it's a custom-built house with a soundproof room. There's no way we could live here for just $100 a month," I retorted. Indeed, the house we live in now was custom-built when we had our child, with both our parents contributing to the down payment. It's my dream house, made possible because I had a lifetime job and both our families supported us. However, compared to the housing market in our area, it was significantly expensive. But even with our parents paying half the price up front, our monthly payments turned out to be much higher compared to neighboring rental properties. We did discuss the price with Bob at the time, but he brushed it off, saying, "I'll leave it to you." Michelle, I used to think he trusted me, but now I see he just found the topic tedious. Why didn't you consult me properly? Isn't that a waste too? Bob argued. Oh, I did. You just didn't engage. Besides, half of the rent came from my piano lesson earnings, and ever since you only contributed $300 for living expenses, I've been covering everything else. You have no right to complain. Bob was speechless, but he didn't look convinced. He glared at me, and then, as if recalling something, smirked. Fine, my bad about the rent, but you should have shown me these papers earlier. I would have thought about it then, he said. Bob fired back. All right, then just add the rent to the $300 living expenses. If you have an income too, why should I bear all the expenses? He seemed to be on the defensive now. Just looking closely at the household ledger, he began marking it with a red pen nearby. This, and this. All unnecessary expenses. We don't need these lessons. Look, it can be managed in $300. You just spend too much. So he has money for his mistress, but not for her children. I was boiling inside. But it was too early to bring that up. I glanced at the clock, then gave Bob a sweet smile. Do you know the average monthly grocery bill for a family of four? Around $120, ain't it? That's why $300 is more than enough. On average, it's $870. What? The average for a family of four is close to $900. Our grocery bills are usually around $600. That's after cutting corners wherever possible. Bob was lost in thought. What in his tact? Why didn't he realize that living on $300 a month was impossible? I began to feel a headache coming on. So you can't live on $300. Do you get that? No way. It's a lie. Suddenly, Bob started acting like a child, vehemently denying the truth. I looked at him with disbelief. What I once found endearing, his childlike qualities, now at the age of 40, something seemed just creepy. My colleague said he can live on $300 a month. You must have altered the numbers. Exasperated by Bob's persistence, I replied, well, maybe Catherine, a 22-year-old newbie still living with her parents, might be able to manage with that amount. Why are you bringing up Catherine? The mention of the woman's name seemed to have caught Bob off guard. His confidence vanishing. As with a cold sweat forming, he stood still. I laid out a few pictures and credit card statements on the table for Bob to see. Catherine Smith, 22, lives with her working dad at a major company and her stay-at-home mom. After the party for the new employees, one thing led to another with you. I know about your affair that began after you played the gentleman sending her home. How do you know all this? Because she told me herself. What? Bob was in shock. After all, it's rare for a wife to hear details of an affair straight from the other woman. Oh, I became friends with her. Straight on social media. It was easy. Just approached her, saying I too was having an affair. She quickly spilled the beans, even shared photos. But how? In the age of information, you gotta be careful. She shared photos like this one. I said as I placed a picture of them in a compromising position right in front of Bob. Bob, with eyes darting around, was sweating profusely. Oh, and she should be receiving one of these soon. Receiving what? This legal notice. I said that and handed Bob the certified letter. It was an official document my lawyer, whom I had contracted while gathering evidence, had prepared for me. As Bob read through it, his face turned pale. $5,000. I can't afford that. Oh, your father said that amount was reasonable, didn't he? What? You told my parents? Of course. They should be here any moment. Just then, the doorbell rang. I simply replied, come in, to the person on the intercom and returned to the living room. Miss Shelley, is everything sorted? Thank you. I'd a ton. That's good to hear. My mother-in-law stood behind her husband, looking utterly devastated. My father-in-law, usually a calm man, was red with rage. He approached Bob and landed a solid punch. Ouch. What was that for? Dad? You're no son of mine. Betraying Michelle. You're the worst. I'm gonna knock some sense into that rotten character of yours. Bob was in shock, and frankly, seeing my father-in-law, this angry was a first for me too. Right then, the intercom rang again, signaling another visitor. I told the person on the other side to come in. Come on in. Bob was speechless upon seeing that person. Now that everyone involved is here, I'd like to resume our discussion. Please have a seat over here. I said that and pointed to the chairs I'd set up at the end of the table. Both my in-laws and the other guests who arrived later took their seats as instructed. After confirming that everyone was seated, I resumed the conversation with a smile. For you, Catherine, please introduce yourself. I'm Catherine, 22 years old. I'm so sorry. Bob invited me and I couldn't refuse. That act is quite enough. Fun. Chen pretended to cry and kept apologizing, but I cut her off. Caught off guard by my unexpected attitude, Catherine looked shocked. She probably wanted to play the innocent role of a young new hire who was invited by her boss and couldn't say no. Unfortunately for her, I knew all about her plans. You told me everything, didn't you? On Instagram, right? I'm slumming candy. Oh, Moe. Akan turned pale and stared at me as if she had seen a ghost. Her parents looked at her in confusion. I then spread out the printed conversation between Catherine and me on the table for everyone to see. The conversation detailed a shameful account of their affair. Catherine's parents seemed to be shifting between anger and embarrassment. After a while, her mother stood up and slapped Catherine. Ouch about there. What was that for? You told me you were confused because you didn't know he was married and got a legal document about it. What is this? You knew he was married, encouraged to divorce with his wife, and then there's all this trash talk? Catherine's mother seemed very sensitive about the subject and began to tear up. I did feel a bit sorry for her, but it was a mess her daughter had gotten into. Plus, it'd be good for her to know what I'd be talking about next. Also, seeing your husband every day and then hitting on another married man from the same department. That's some stamina. Wait, that's Bob had a disbelieving look on his face as he listened to my words, but when Catherine seemed very flustered, it seemed he realized it was true. Bob stood up, grabbed Catherine by both shoulders, and yelled, "You had another man besides me. Who is it? Do you know how much money I spent on you? And you cheat on me? You wretched woman. Say, you were the one who made the first move on me. Even though you have a wife and kids, it's a privilege for you to date a young and cute girl like me. What? How can you be so deluded?" Touching the two of them bicker, I sighed. Blaming their affair partner while ignoring their own faults, really. There's a limit to how foolish one can be. It seemed like I wasn't the only one who felt this way, as both sets of parents looked utterly dumbfounded. Then, Catherine's father, who had remained silent till now, stood up. The arguing Bob and Catherine noticed and fell silent. Catherine's father began speaking slowly. "Mitchell, I deeply apologize for everything. We want to cover the damages for emotional distress. We know a dairy farmer looking for help, and we'll send Catherine there to work off the debt. She won't leave that place until she pays us back in full, and we won't be providing any assistance. I don't think this makes up for everything, but does this solution work for you? I'd rather not have her name appearing in my bank account every month. So, I appreciate your offer. Whether you cut ties with her is up to you." Efkan's father left with Catherine and her mother. As soon as I felt a sense of resolution regarding Catherine, the front door closed and Bob said something surprising. "Hey, Catherine had me fooled. So can we start over? I'll do whatever you say." "That's fine. I can't stand being with you anymore. Let's get a divorce. And of course, I'll be seeking child support and division of assets." "What? No way." Bob looked dejected as he slumped back into his chair. My father-in-law forcefully dragged Bob out of the house and took him back to their family home. Finally, it was over. I was alone in the living room. I took a deep breath, relaxed, and then started preparing dinner for my children who would be home soon. And after a short while, then started preparing dinner for the kids who were gonna be home soon. Later, and Bob divorced without any issues. Bob's father-in-law was furious, and even his mother-in-law said she never wanted to see his face again. Thus, Bob was cut off from his in-laws. Naturally, he didn't get any financial support and asked if he could pay me in installments, but I refused. As a result, it seemed Bob had to take on debt to pay the alimony. Moreover, his affair with Catherine was exposed. He managed to keep his job, but was moved to a lesser role in the company. Apparently, he got a 40 salary cut. And with his reduced income and the debt to repay, it said he's been working part-time at construction sites at night and even on weekends. I heard Catherine is working non-stop at a relative's ranch. She used to love cosmetics, but now she's living in a place where the only nearby salon is run by elderly women in their 70s. She can't even afford makeup, let alone get her nails done. Every day, she laments that things didn't turn out the way she expected. It seems she's also being sued for alimony by the wife of another man she had an affair with. It sounds like her liberation won't be happening anytime soon. As for me, I'm living happily with my 2 kids. My piano lessons have been gaining popularity. After I started evening classes just 3 times a week, they got fully booked by adults who wanted to learn the piano, and my income has been steadily increasing. I thought my kids would be sad after the divorce, but it turns out it was just me who felt that way. They even told me, "We like you even more after the divorce, Mom. Now you're cooler." That made me feel a bit happy. Education is going to cost a lot, but if things continue this way, I'll be able to save enough for my children's desired future paths. Listening to the beautiful melodies my students play on the piano, my heart dances with excitement for the bright future ahead.